Rosemary, it is a pleasure and always an honor to speak with you. I remember when I was in radio, it could have been like maybe 20 years ago was probably the first time. No, you were like 17 or 18 years old by then. I was old.
Put it this way, I'm
And
29 right now, and I will probably continue to be 29 for a little while longer.
there you go, exactly. And I remember we were talking about my first time speaking with you was about Black History Month. And then I remember as the years went on, we would talk about Black History Month and the subject we're going to talk about today that has to deal with the candles behind me. And I've always learned so much from you because of your poise, your intelligence, your the respect people have for you. And that's why I say it's always an honor speaking with you because you make sure that we don't lose our history. Thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that very kind and very generous introduction, Rudy. I mean, you've been in news for such a very, you've been informing us too. And we value what you've been able to do for our community. And I think that all of us who are out there trying to do something for the greater good, trying to hold space and make our voice and our experience and represent us over the years, I think that is just so critical. And we all do it from the space that we find ourselves in. So thank you for what you do as well.
Thank you so much. Before we do talk about, again, what is behind me, what are your thoughts of what we have been dealing with for the last 2 years and the things that we've seen, the things that we've heard, the things that we've experienced for years, and then suddenly people are using that word woken, which I hate that word. What do you think about all this?
Well, Rudy, I think that for a really long time, people think that we live our lives completely outside and transparently and openly. And as a Black Canadian woman, there are many things I have never been able to say, never heard other people talk about in a mixed group of people. There are truths that we know, and whether we have all of the data lists in front of us, there are things that we have experienced ongoing, and not only that we have experienced, but that our parents, our grandparents, people that upon whose shoulders we stand, they have been going through these things. And I think that when we had, the outbreak, because it was two pandemics that took place simultaneously, the health pandemic, which of course was a bit new, although perhaps some people might feel it was something we could know was coming given SARS and other things, but the racial pandemic. And thank God for George Floyd, not because George Floyd was such an as an individual was so very perfect, but rather because his tragic, untimely, and needless murder in a public realm forced people to look at things differently. And the pandemic kept us in that space of being with our own thoughts and our own feelings for a really long time. And so last year, this time, I was amazed at things that I was hearing outside. People talking about racism a little bit more openly, people talking about microaggressions much more routinely. But the issue is that because some people have just come to know that these things have exist, there are those of us who have continued to experience them, who have continued to be disadvantaged by them. And we are still looking for the accountability and the transformation that will really make a difference here.
Amen to everything that you just said. We do talk about the holiday season and celebrating, and one of the big celebrations happens right after Christmas, and that has to deal with the candles behind us. Could you tell us, please, what these candles are about? Basically, what is the holiday? What is the holiday about? And how do these candles represent the holiday?
Sure. Well, first of all, we're talking about Kwanzaa. And Kwanzaa is something that began in the United States, like many huge cultural movements happen too, but there are others. And what it does is it tries to, Kwanzaa actually stands for first fruits. And fruits are basically those things that we um, garner, that we benefit from. And there are first fruits celebrations that have been able, that we can track back to very early civilizations in Africa. Um, it's about gathering, it's about reverence, it's about commemoration, and it's about commitment. And when you say it's a holiday, it is a holiday, but not like Christmas or Hanukkah or some others, because this is a cultural event that is grounded in community, and in particular the African American, African Canadian, Pan African community.
Is that why? And I know there are people who don't understand the colors that are used. Why the colors, and why the number of candles?
Well, let's start with the colors. I think that red, black, and green have been part of Black liberation celebrations and discussions and
You're so
conferences
black.
for a very long time. And they form the colors that you find in the flags of independent African nations. But they were also colors that um, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, in crafting a document on Pan-Africanism, used Black representing the people of Africa. I'll start there. Red, the blood that represents us, and green, the abundance that is Africa. And so I think that when Dr. Malawi Karenga created this African-inspired gathering celebration, he wanted to make sure that it connected to African isms, Pan-African isms. And while it's not political and it's not religious, it is absolutely cultural.
So the number of candles that we use, is there significance behind that?
There is, and there are seven, not just because some people feel seven is good luck, but because each one of the candles represents each one of the principles of Kwanzaa. And I'm going to try to read them for you because I don't know, I always forget one. So the first principle is umoja, or unity, which is about maintaining unity in the family and the community. Second is kujijakila, which is about self-determination and about how we define ourselves, which is really critical. The next is ujima, which you probably have heard that one because some people have used it for organizational names. And it's about work and responsibility. The next is Ujama, which is about cooperative economics, supporting each other in our business institutions. Nia, which we've heard a lot of because of the development of a cultural center recently, but it's about purpose. Nia means purpose, um, the, the, the purposeful effort to reflect and develop our communities. And the last one, of course, for a very long time, Harborfront had something called the Kumba Festival.
That's
Well,
right.
Kumba is creativity, and it's the seventh principle of Kwanzaa. And it's the sixth principle, which means doing whatever we can to enhance and beautify our communities. And the last principle is imani, which is faith. And that might be your standardized faith, church, mosque, or it might be just your spirituality about enhancing and seeing better things for our community.
How do most people celebrate this cultural event on the 26th? Is there a gathering of food? Is what do most people do? And also, and I think I'd asked you this the first time, and I can't remember what it was. Is there a greeting that you would present with somebody when you meet them?
Well, lucky for me, I took Swahili a long time ago, although I don't remember too much of it. And the greeting is habari gani, which means
Very Ghani.
basically what's going on. And then you would reply. But aside from that, you don't necessarily need to have that greeting. I think that the coming together in and of itself is so powerful. And there's symbols that are also connected aside from the candles. And so the candles are placed in a mokeka, which is the candle, sorry, the canera. Let me make sure I've got here. I think that the makeka is the straw mat. I'm working backwards here. So let's start with that. You have a straw mat that you would put on a surface that you're going to dedicate to your Kwanzaa celebration. And on top of that, you're going to put the kinara, which are the 7 candles. And then you might also add to that corn or the mazao, a cob of corn, and the zawadi, which are gifts. And the gifts are not, you know, they're small mementos. They're not meant to be, the next app, next game or whatever. They're meant to be meaningful and small and very important to people to share. And so when you put all of that together, the makeka with the kanara, which is the candle holder, the Misuma Saba. Saba means 7. Misu, I'm not saying it well, but Misuma, which are the candles. That essentially is the symbol of Kwanzaa. And then you begin to light the candles on each day of, um, of Kwanzaa, each day representing one of the principles, and you end with the lighting of the black candle in the center.
It's a beautiful symbol and it's a beautiful celebration. And I absolutely love this. And it's funny because, again, going back to our first interview, you reminded me so much of the things that I had forgotten about Kwanzaa. And I did ask this before, but I'll ask again too. Families come together, is a feast, just conversation, just people being together.
Pretty much. I mean, I think we all know how to do that really well, but to come together with a purpose, to come together, and if the day, if this the principle of the day happens to be Nia, to talk about those things that are purposeful, to make plans around what you might do that is purposeful, and or imani, and what you might do and how you might practice your faith in your community and your spiritual faith. I think it's just to use the principles to bring some focus on each day.
And it gives you a preparation for the new year. I absolutely love this. As we talk very quickly about the new year, do you have any plans on Black History Month? Are there any events that you are going to be speaking at, or do you know yet? Because, everybody's always planning ahead of time. So I'm just curious, and I'm hoping you and I are going to talk before Black History Month to know more about what's going to be happening.
Well, as you know, I feel a real strong connection to Black History Month because I advocated for the formal recognition of Black History Month at every level of government, and I have been fortunate enough to be in Ottawa, except for COVID, uh, every year for even the national celebrations of Black History Month ever since became national in 1990, effective in 1996. I last year partnered up and did an online event. It was amazing. I did 2 amazing online events, one with an American partner, an international partner, and one with an academic partner. And I'm absolutely open to do things in classrooms and conferences, and I'm very happy to talk about aspects of Black history with anyone, and hope that Even I still have a few spots. So if there's anything that comes up, by all means, including you, of course, Rudy.
Of course.
Um, but I think Black History Month, it's a time to celebrate, and it's a time to celebrate some of the things that we've been doing all year. And as you know, while it's not Black History Month because it happens in August, but it's Black History. I was also able, after working since 1995, to have August 1st formally recognized across this country. And that didn't get passed until March of 2021. So, I mean, that's important. And I think that, as we get closer to Emancipation Day, as we get closer to some other dates during the year, because February isn't the only time, that we'll be doing more, even more.
And I always encourage people also to the Underground Railroad. People should really learn, go and see, because it is eye opening, very eye opening.
It really is. I think that, there's so much about the Underground Railroad. People want to diminish it sometimes, but I think there's a number of ways you have to look at it. One way is that this was a significant act of resistance by people who were enslaved in the United States and who were prompted by learning that they could be free in what we now call Canada to pour into this country by the thousands. And many of them stayed and developed communities. Um, but the other side of that is that even though they stayed and developed communities, it isn't like they were fully accepted. And if anyone thinks that that is the case, they would be mistaken. And I think that unfortunately, one of some of the statistics that we have come across, as we were talking earlier about the whole George Floyd thing, is that it doesn't matter if somebody is relatively new to Canada or they are generational Canadians, they are going to be disadvantaged. There's a disadvantage to being a person of African origin in this country that the Underground Railroad did not erase. So, but to see some of the spaces,
Yeah.
um, I've had the opportunity to tour sites on both sides of the border, and they're quite amazing. Obviously, once people crossed into Canada, they didn't really have to hide unless there were some bounty hunters on their trail. And we know that St. Catharines, um, Guelph, London, Woodstock, Hamilton, Windsor, Owen Sound, Collingwood, these were all places that had Black settlements. And in some places, a place like Chatham, Ontario, 30% of the population was Black. And they didn't necessarily all move away. So it's fascinating, really.
Two more questions. One, um, I remember back in, I would say, well, probably my whole life, but really, I would say towards when I was in my late teens, early 20s was when I really started to do my search, my learning history, because growing up, I wasn't taught my history. If it wasn't for my parents, and even my dad would wake me up 2 in the morning, well, I should say 2 in the morning, like maybe 11 or 12 o'clock, to bring me downstairs to watch a documentary that would be on at that time to learn about my history. um and books and reading, and just it was hard to find. Do you think because of what has happened in the last few years that history is going to be finally told in the proper manner that it should be, and with respect, instead of having things either hidden, erased? Because the things that I had to find, and it took me forever because it wasn't like could go on my phone or go on my laptop. I literally had to search for these things. Will these things change? Will they be taught in schools? Um, and we're not even just talking about with Black history, Indigenous, and so many others that have been either reformed or ignored?
I certainly hope so. That's something that I've been looking for ever since I became more publicly involved in African Canadian history. But there's been so much pushback against it happening. It needs to be something that is required and part of the curriculum. And unfortunately, up until this very moment in time, it remains something that is very much up to an individual teacher to consider doing. And they may be just like you or just like so many other people really have to scramble to see what they can find that will be useful and helpful, although more is coming out. Um, I think that, it takes both. It takes the bottom up, the community to demand it, and it takes people who are in a position to make those decisions to make those decisions. And then not only does the mandate become very clear, but then the resources to make it happen also become available. It should have happened a long time ago. I've been Black since I was born. I continue to be Black. My kids are Black. Um, I started this when my son was a baby. He's not a baby anymore. And so there are still generations of kids out there who are not seeing themselves reflected, who are not learning about their history, and who don't understand that there have been Black people in this country from the beginning, who don't understand that everybody isn't from one place, who don't understand that sometimes microaggressions are real and what they are connected to. And these are things that we need, because if we want to have that kind of society where people make good choices that are helpful to themselves and to others, they need to have all of the information that's required. And I'm saying this even for white people that might be listening or non-Black people that might be listening, because you don't know uh, who your child will go to school with, or where they will end up going working, or who they might end up falling in love with. So wouldn't it be helpful if you already started to give them information so that they could make some independent decisions about what's important to them?
Amen. Last question. As we do go into a new year, 2022, like you said, it's been a tough 3 years. And every year, it seemed like everybody was always like, 2019, I got to get to 2020. Oh, hated 2020. Let's get to 2021. They're thinking the same thing. Let's get to 2022. What advice can you give folks who every year seem to hope 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year, everything is going to change? And if they really look back, it's not the immediate change. Change does happen, but it's not always for the good. What advice can you give them?
I think that we all need to decide for ourselves what's important. And I think that we all also need to do those things that we can to bring about those changes that we want to see. I think just like we can't assume that the school is going to provide everything for our kids, we can't assume that government is going to provide everything for us. If we don't ask for it, if we don't demand it, if we don't push for it, if we don't organize around it, it may not happen. And so we're not going to see the end of certain things, but we can certainly find ways to improve the experience for the next generation. And maybe that's the best thing that we can do.
Rosemary, thank you so much. As I said, always love and respect for you and everything that you do. I wish you and your family happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and just all the best in the new year. Thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you. And all the best to you, Rudy, and your family, and to your listeners.